Shalom. Welcome to Ohale Avotenu, Tens of Our Fathers. In this week's Torah portion, Vayera, we read things which to many a Western reader are distasteful or even repugnant, and yet there is deep and profound meaning to be found in the pages of this particular passage. It is, in fact, the reason why I decided to open this group in the first place, why I decided and felt so inspired that this needed to happen. We read about Avraham, and he sees the three men coming down the road. We see him having this outpouring of hospitality towards these guests. We see two of the men go into the city to Sodom, and we have Lot come out and also extend the hospitality, whereas the men of Sodom had other plans. There are elements here which can be very distressing, and what we find is that, like so many other things, it is important to remember the context in which these things transpired. These things happened in the ancient Near East, and I once heard years ago that text without context is often used as a pretext. Fundamentally, when we are looking at this, we need to understand the culture in which these things took place. So, to that point, I would like to look at the extant Bedouin cultures of today, where if you are, say, a Bedouin and there's someone coming through the wilderness, and you understand that the wilderness, the desert, dry, hot, deadly places where there is no water, it is such a profoundly important thing to offer water, shade, food, sustenance, nourishment, and so on to someone in the wilderness, that it is your honor to extend 3 days of welcome to anyone you see walking down the road, and to bring them water and bread and curds. And if it's a particularly prestigious guest, you also bring them meat. And it's very interesting. You see Abraham do exactly this very thing. He runs out to meet them. He's standing in his tent door in the heat of the day. He runs out to meet these men. He offers them the water and the bread to wash their feet, to refresh their souls. He runs back to the tent. He gets the bread from Sarah. He goes and he gets the cattle prepared, the young calf, the fatted calf. And he does all of these things. And what's really interesting is you can see these same things being practiced out in the Bedouin cultures of today. Middle Eastern hospitality is renowned for just being an incredible custom and tradition. One of the things which is particularly distressing about this story is as two of the men head down into Sodom, we see Lot begin to do the same things. He welcomes the men into his house. He prepares the unleavened bread, the food, the feast for them. But the men of Sodom have a different idea. They have a different reception planned for these men. And, well, due to the nature of YouTube and other things, I shall refrain from getting into all the gory details, but please read the portion for yourself. You'll understand what I am talking about if you are not otherwise familiar. And of course, the response which Lot gives to the men of Sodom has often been criticized, and many people have had their commentaries. However, I would like to point out a few things that is very interesting. First off, one of the things that Lot does is he offers, when he makes this offer, he asks the people to do what is, quote, right in their eyes, right? Do what is good in your eyes. And we know scripturally that the eye is associated with judgment, how you look on a matter, how you perceive things, what you think is right, what you think is wrong. The hand, it's what you do things with. The ear, what you're listening to. And So, in asking them to do what is good in their eyes, it's almost as if he is calling them to question what they are doing, what they are perceiving as good action. And we see immediately in their response, the men of Sodom, they don't turn around and say, well, we don't want the women. Their immediate response, like so many people in the world today, is this guy's judging us, right? They didn't take it as a nah, you know, we don't go for, we're not into the ladies, right? They didn't have that response. Their response is this man came here judging. And so on the one hand, there is a intercultural dialogue that's taking place that is often glossed over in Western commentary. It's often missed. But we see extant throughout the rest of scriptures that when you're calling on someone to do whatever is good in their eyes, it's often an appeal to someone's judging of a situation. But more than this, and I think this one is crucial to understanding this passage, is in the extant Bedouin cultures of today, the ones that are, very much an analogy of these stories, when somebody comes under the shade of your tent, right, they come under the shade of your roof, they have protection rights. Okay, so let's say you're in the desert. It doesn't really matter where you come from. You're not even going to be asked where you come from for like 3 days. You're wandering through the desert. You get welcomed in to the tent. Maybe you were a thief, maybe you were a murderer, maybe you were whatever, right? An American in Iraq, who knows, you know? But you get welcomed in, and an enemy on the outside comes for your life. It's the tent's responsibility, by custom, by law, by everything that is considered right in that culture, to defend your life to the point where the sons of the tent, the children of the tent, will die in your stead to defend you. That's a heavy thing. But it was something that was honored then. It's something that a number of these people still honor to this day. And what is to me so frightfully important about that concept is it speaks to the very nature of the good news in which we all believe. Namely, that the murderer, the thief, the whoever it is, comes under the tent of the father of the house. Doesn't matter where we came from, what we were before. We've come under the shade of his protection. And the enemy on the outside comes for us, comes for our lives, comes for our souls. But the son of the house gives his life to defend us. This is a concept which was baked into the culture of this family, the family of Abraham. And we see the tent hospitality custom of his family, of our people, play out repeatedly throughout the scriptures. We see Rivka, right? She's at the well when Avram's steward is coming and he's looking for a wife for Yitzchak, and he asks for a particular sign. Interestingly, he doesn't say the most beautiful woman in town, the richest woman in town, the one who's got the most land, goats, whatever. He's looking for a particular characteristic that is in line with this very custom. And so he asks her for water, and she then proceeds to not only offer water for all his camels as well, and we're talking, what, 10 camels that came in from a long desert journey. This is hundreds of gallons, potentially, of water that this woman is drawing and pouring out, pouring out, pouring out. And then, of course, they get welcomed into the house, and so on and so forth. And we see this theme replay. Moshe when he is fleeing from Egypt, and he fights off the Egyptians and saves the shepherd girls. And his soon-to-be father-in-law asks the girls, like, where is he? Why didn't you invite him in for bread, right? And again, I'm paraphrasing. This is just commentary. So many years later, we come to this place of Yeshua. And on the one hand, when he's being welcomed into the guests of, or welcomed as a guest into some of the Pharisees' homes, and the tax collectors and so on and so forth, he comments on whether or not water was offered for him to wash his feet. He comments on whether or not he was treated with that same kind of hospitality, that same kind of welcome that was extant in the house of Abraham. But beyond this, he also is the one who stands like Abraham and serves, right? When Abraham brings the food to the traveling strangers, he not only gives it to them, but he stands there, right? He stations himself to serve. We see this with Yeshua. He stations himself to serve, right? So he gets up and he begins to wash his disciples' feet. So not only is he the one who does not come to be served, but he's the one who comes to serve. And this is the household of Abraham, right? From the time of our fathers that we read about in this particular passage, all the way through to the Messiah himself. And I do not find it to be coincidental that the Almighty chose to send the Messiah who exemplified that culture through the line of a man who exemplified that culture. And in this particular Torah portion, we see the juxtaposition between the actions of the hospitality of Abraham and the reception that was offered by the men of Sodom. The beauty of this particular passage is the fact that it paints a culture in which the Almighty is moving, a culture which welcomes the outsider, the foreigner, the stranger into the tent, into the home, and says, you are under the shade of my roof. You don't deserve to be here. It's the honor of the tent, right? The honor of the father of the tent to welcome you, to safeguard you, to do those things, not on your merit, but because it's who the master of the tent is. But it's also the honor of the master of the tent to defend you, to safeguard you, because you've come under the shelter of his roof. Again, has nothing to do with your merit, has nothing to do with who you are, who you were, what you did. When you come under the shelter of his roof, the son of the tent will give his life for you. And that's the beauty of this passage. It's a hard passage for Western readers to read. It's a hard passage for Western readers to understand. And the horror and shock of the cross, the horror and shock of what our sin required, right, is something which is surpassed by the wonder and honor and dignity of the Most High and the Messiah, who have walked out this incredible, incredible custom to welcome the stranger into the tent, to give them protection, to give them shade, to give them a home and a family that they didn't otherwise have, and to even take on the responsibility to safeguard you, and to, in the case of the Messiah, pour out his life for your sake, right? And it's a custom that we see throughout the scriptures. It's a custom that we see throughout the patriarchs, but also through the instructions of Messiah, right? So, and this will be my little soapbox against some of the things which I see as issues in the Messianic movement. We will argue the calendar, We will argue the Nephilim. We will argue the shape of the earth, right? And people will spend hours and hours and hours and hours on this stuff. And frankly, my contention with this, and I'm not saying anybody should not study that to show themselves approved, right? Clearly, get into the Hebrew, get into your word, understand what it says, try to live the life of a Berean, try to live the life of a disciple of the Messiah. But when I contemplate the ratio of time which the average follower of Messiah spends on these things, these arguments, right? As juxtaposed against the ratio of time that or as compared to the amount of time which Yeshua himself spent on these things, I would suggest we are not prioritizing the same things that he prioritized. When you consider the fact that the calendar arguments have been going on literally for thousands of years, okay, for thousands of years, perhaps you're going to be the one to answer that question and convince the whole world of the right calendar, perhaps. But when I see his description of separating the sheep from the goats, right? When he's saying these people will be on the left, these people will be on the right, I don't read him say that if you've got the wrong rapture doctrine, or you've got the wrong calendar, or you just didn't quite understand, the truth of the lizard people, okay, that you're going to be suddenly sent off into the outer darkness, okay? I don't see that. What do I see? Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit those who are sick and in prison. If somebody's thirsty in the wilderness, bring them that cup of water. Bring them that water to wash their feet. I see the same things that Avraham did. I see the same things which Rivka did. I see the same things which play out again and again in Scripture. The same things which Messiah spent his life doing. Fundamentally, as a movement of believers, we ought to be found faithful doing the works of the Master when he comes. I never saw him argue about the Nephilim. I never saw him got into these big arguments about the calendars and the other things. Often, the religious arguments that he got involved with were when people came to him with a specific question, and we will do some Q&A. I'm not saying we're not allowed to question. I'm not saying we shouldn't try to figure these things out. But the primary focus of his life, of his ministry, and therefore should be that of his followers, his disciples, and we see this with the first apostles, is going out, ministering to the lost, welcoming them in to the tent of our Father. We need to come back to that. We need to come back to that core. We need to come back to that first mission, right? What is the good news? What is the gospel? Is it incessant arguments about the shape of the earth? I mean, if the earth is a trapezoid or whatever, let's say the earth used to be flat, but then they invented donuts and it got a little squidgy around the middle. Do you not still have hungry people that need to be fed, naked people that need to be clothed, widows and orphans that need husbands, fathers? Do we not still have lost and dying in this world that are going into eternity without knowing the King? Because if so, then I would like to refer you back to something that Yeshua said when the Pharisees of his day were tithing the mint and the cumin. These you should have done, but without neglecting the weightier matters of the Torah, mercy and justice. If you want to figure out your calendar, if you want to try to do what's righteous in the eyes of the Almighty, by all means. I keep Shabbat. I eat clean. I wear my tassels with a thread of blue. But let it not be said that we do these things and we neglect the prime directive that he gave us in ministering in his house. Let it not be said that we were of a different character and a different nature than the household of Abraham, where instead of welcoming in the stranger and trying to help them come under the shade of his roof, we put up all these barriers to say, no, you are other, you can't be here, you got to get out. Obviously, we have certain circumstances where people cannot come into the tent, and they're few and specific. And your argument about the calendar is not on the list. Your argument about the shape of the earth is not on the list. How you look at the New World Order and all of those things, that's not on the list. Breaking fellowship over those things and having these massive internal fights or arguing to the destruction of the hearers is not profitable. Study, learn the Hebrew, learn the Greek, do all those things. But don't let it come at the expense of living a life which reflects the basic core mission of our Messiah. He gave his life for you. He gave his life for them. Will you do the same? Shabbat Shalom.